The Nazis are the ultimate villains of the past. Driven by a racist ideology, this infamous political party carried out some of the most horrific acts in human history, including the extermination of 6 million Jews. Though people across Europe were outraged by the Nazis' villainy, resisting their actions was a dangerous thing to do. Those who were caught often ended up dead or imprisoned. But Irena Sendler was different. She risked her life by trying to save as many Jewish children as possible. Inside the ghetto, though Irena was a Christian, she had a close connection to Judaism. When she was a child, her father had worked as a doctor and often treated his patients for free. After his death, members of the Jewish community offered to pay for Irena's education as a way of saying thank you. In addition to learning Yiddish, Irena grew up with Jewish children and became close friends with many of them. So, when the Nazis established the Warsaw Ghetto in November 1940, she was horrified to discover that some of her lifelong friends were trapped inside. A 9-foot wall surrounded the ghetto, which, at its peak, contained almost 500,000 Jews. The Nazis guarded the entrance day and night, preventing anyone from leaving. Disease and starvation were rife, and many were deported to extermination camps. Because she worked for the social welfare department in Warsaw, Irena was given access to the ghetto so she could check for signs of typhus. The disease spreads via lice, fleas, and mites, and the Nazis didn't want it to move beyond the ghetto. Irena used her special permit to provide those inside the ghetto with clothing, medicine, food, and other essential supplies. But it wasn't enough. Thousands of Jews were still dying every month, and Irena was determined to do something about it. Saving the children. In the summer of 1942, Irena joined Zgoda, the Council to Aid Jews, a secret organization that resisted the Nazi occupation of Poland. With the help of her fellow rebels, Irena developed a plan to rescue the children from the ghetto. But it wasn't easy. She needed permission from the parents, and some simply refused to be parted from their children. Others, however, were more forthcoming. They knew their children were much more likely to survive if they could escape from the ghetto. Irena used a variety of methods to get the children to safety. Some were placed into trunks, sacks, and suitcases, while others were hidden amongst tools or supplies. But Irena's preferred method was to use the basement inside the ghetto's courthouse building. From here, she would smuggle the children through an opening onto the street above where an ambulance was waiting for them. Once they were free, Irena had to make sure the children remained hidden. She achieved this by creating fake identity papers that disguised the Jewish children as Christian orphans. Their names were changed, and Irena even taught them Christian prayers in case they were ever questioned. Irena and her associates also had to find places for the children to stay. Most were placed in orphanages, but some were taken to Catholic convents or family homes outside of the city. Irena kept a list of all the children she saved, so she could return them to their families once the war was over. She continually updated this list as more and more children were saved. If the Nazis ever found the list, Irena knew they would hunt down the children and probably kill them. To prevent this from happening, she put the list inside a glass jar and buried it under an apple tree in her neighbor's garden. Torture and execution. In October 1943, several informants who knew about Irena's activities told the Nazis what she was doing, and the Gestapo, the Nazi secret state police, came to arrest her. They searched her apartment for 2 hours, determined to find information about the Jewish children and the Zgoda. They found nothing, however, so Irena was taken to Pawiak prison to be interrogated. Here, the Nazis tortured her repeatedly and broke some of the bones inside her legs and feet. But Irena refused to tell them anything. Angered by her silence, the Nazis sentenced her to death. On the day of her execution, Irena couldn't see any way out of the situation. From her perspective, she only had a few hours left to live. But rather than taking Irena to the firing squad, the Nazi officials released her instead. As it turned out, the Zgoda had bribed the Nazi officials in exchange for their friend's safety. Though Irena had escaped death, she was forced to stay out of sight for the remainder of the Nazi occupation. Afterward, when the war was over, Irena recovered the list and did her utmost to reunite the Jewish children with their families. Tragically, many of the parents had died at an extermination camp in the northeast of Warsaw, so Irena arranged for the children to be relocated to Israel, where they could grow up with a strong Jewish identity. Irena's efforts didn't go unnoticed. She received the Righteous Among the Nations Award in 1965 and the Jan Karski Award for Valor and Courage in 2003. She was even nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. In total, Irena saved the lives of 2,500 Jewish children.
Half of all Frenchmen aged 20 to 32 at war's outbreak were dead when it was over. More than 1/3 of all German men aged 19 to 22 were killed. Millions of veterans were crippled in body and in spirit. Advances in the technology of killing included the use of poison gas. Under the pressure of unending carnage, governments toppled and great empires dissolved.